His hand gripped mine with unexpected strength as the monitor beside us beeped in steady rhythm, and after I whispered those 3 words, "I forgive you," tears streamed down his hollow cheeks, his voice breaking as he uttered 5 words that shattered my world. It wasn't an accident, Eleanor. The hospital room seemed to shrink around me. The antiseptic smell suddenly became overwhelming, burning my nostrils as my mind struggled to process what Richard had just said. 42 years of marriage, and now, as machines kept him breathing, he decided to speak a truth that would rewrite our entire history. What wasn't an accident? I asked, though deep down I already knew. The car crash that took our daughter Jessica's life 15 years ago. The tragedy that had been a shadow over our marriage ever since, following us like a ghost through empty holidays, silent dinners, and separate bedrooms. His breathing was labored now, each word costing him precious energy. "I need to tell you everything before I go," he said, his voice barely audible above the mechanical hums and beeps of the equipment keeping him alive. "I can't take it with me, Eleanor." The oncologist had given Richard 3 days at most. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate, doesn't offer extensions. I had come to this room in St. Mary's Hospital in Portland, Maine, ready to make peace, to offer forgiveness for the small transgressions of our imperfect marriage, the forgotten anniversaries, the business trips that always seemed more important than family vacations, the emotional distance that grew into a chasm after Jessica died. I never expected this. A nurse appeared at the doorway, her face professionally compassionate. "Mrs. Williams, everything okay in here?" I forced a smile, quickly wiping away tears. "Yes, fine. Thank you." Richard's eyes pleaded with me. Even clouded with morphine, I could see the desperation in them, the need for absolution, the weight of secrets kept for far too long. "Everyone thinks I was just driving too fast in the rain," he continued once the nurse left, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But that's not what happened, Eleanor. Jessica and we were arguing, screaming at each other. She told me she was pregnant. 17 and pregnant, and His voice cracked, dissolving into a coughing fit that shook his frail body. I reached for the water cup with the bendy straw, guided it to his lips. Outside the window, snow was beginning to fall over Portland, each flake dancing under the yellow glow of street lamps. How peaceful it looked. How deceptive. I lost control, he finally continued. Not just of the car, of myself. I hit the steering wheel so hard, I wasn't watching the road. The truck. I never saw it coming from the side street. My stomach lurched. All these years I had blamed the rainstorm, the slick roads. I had comforted Richard in his grief, holding him as he sobbed at Jessica's funeral. I had believed him when he said there was nothing he could have done. "There's more," Richard said, and my heart, already fractured, prepared to shatter completely. "Jessica wasn't the only one I've lied to you about." The monitor's steady beeping seemed to grow louder, filling the space between us with its mechanical rhythm. Outside in the hallway, I could hear the squeaking of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the distant ring of telephones at the nurse's station, the muted conversations of other families facing their own life-altering moments. "I need to know everything," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "All of it, Richard. Before you go." His eyes, those blue eyes I'd fallen in love with at 19, closed briefly. When they opened again, they held the look of a man preparing to jump from a great height, terrified, but somehow also relieved. "It started 25 years ago," he began, "with your sister. My name is Eleanor Williams, and until 3 days ago, I thought I understood my life. I'm 64 years old, a retired elementary school librarian living in the same colonial-style house in Portland, Maine, that Richard and I bought when we were newlyweds. It's too big for just me now, with its 4 bedrooms and the backyard where Jessica once had a swing set, but I could never bring myself to sell it. Too many memories, some sweet, some bitter, all mine. The neighbors call me the Widow Williams now. They bring casseroles and sympathy cards. They don't know what Richard told me in his final hours. They see only a grieving wife, not a woman whose foundation has been ripped away, leaving her standing on nothing but air and decades of lies. My daily routine since Richard's funeral last week has been simple. Wake up, make coffee I don't drink, sit in his study surrounded by his things, and try to reconcile the man I thought I married with the man who confessed to me as he died. Sometimes I forget he's gone, and I call out his name when I hear the furnace kick on, or a branch scrape against the window. The silence that follows is always a fresh wound, This morning, I stood at my bathroom sink, staring at my reflection. Gray hair in a practical bob, lines around my eyes and mouth that speak of both laughter and sorrow. I used to think these were the marks of a life well lived. Now I wonder if they're just the evidence of a grand deception, of decades spent loving a man who never really existed except in my imagination. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with questions in her eyes. Did I ever really know him? Were there signs I missed? Or worse, ignored? How much of our life together was real, and how much was carefully constructed fiction? I think about our modest, predictable life in Portland, Richard's accounting firm downtown, where he was partner for 30 years. My work at Lincoln Elementary, helping children discover the magic of books. Our friends, mostly couples we'd known since our 20s, people with whom we shared summer barbecues and New Year's Eve parties, and the quiet understanding of those who have weathered life's storms together, or so I thought. Today, the house feels especially empty. Outside, October has painted the maple trees in our front yard crimson and gold, and a crisp breeze sends their leaves spiraling to the ground. Jessica loved autumn. "It smells like possibilities," she used to say, her young face alight with the certainty that life held wonderful things in store for her. She never got to find out. I make myself move through the motions of living. I shower. I dress in a blue cardigan and gray slacks. I toast bread I have no appetite for. The coffee pot gurgles and steams, filling the kitchen with a rich aroma that once signified comfort, but now means nothing. My wedding ring catches the morning light as I reach for a mug from the cabinet. I've been meaning to take it off, but something stops me each time my fingers close around it. The phone rings, startling me from my thoughts. It's Barbara, my younger sister by 2 years, the sister who, according to Richard's deathbed confession, has been keeping secrets of her own. "Just checking in on you, Ellie," she says, her voice warm with concern. "Do you need anything? I can come by later with groceries." "I'm fine," I lie, the words automatic. "Just taking it one day at a time. That's all any of us can do," she says, and I wonder if there's a hidden meaning in her words, a subtext I've been missing for years. I miss him too, you know? I'll bet you do, I think, but don't say. After we hang up, I wander into Richard's study. It still smells like him, a mixture of the sandalwood aftershave he wore for 40 years and the leather of his chair. His reading glasses still sit on top of the financial magazine he was reading before his last hospitalization. I pick them up, these intimate objects that belong to my husband, and try to reconcile them with the stranger who spoke to me as he died. On his desk, there's a framed photo of the three of us, Richard, Jessica, and me, taken at Acadia National Park when Jessica was about 10. We're standing on the rocky shoreline, squinting into the sun, arms around each other. Looking at it now, I search our faces for clues. Was Richard already leading a double life then? Was Jessica, even at 10, beginning to keep secrets that would eventually lead to that fatal car ride? Behind the frame, partially hidden, is a small key I've never noticed before. I pick it up, turning it over in my hand. It's not for any lock in our house. I'm sure of that. Another secret, waiting to be unlocked. I sink into Richard's leather chair, suddenly overwhelmed. The life I thought I had, comfortable, ordinary, rooted in truth and mutual understanding, was an illusion. Now, at 64, I have to decide. Do I leave the past buried with Richard, or do I use this key, and all the other clues he left behind, to uncover the full truth? No matter how painful, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 11. Outside, a neighbor's dog barks at a passing car. Life continues its relentless forward motion, indifferent to my discovery that everything I believed about my past might be built on sand. I close my fingers around the key, feeling its teeth bite into my palm. There is no going back to the comfortable ignorance of before. Richard's words echo in my mind. It started 25 years ago, with your sister. What choice do I really have? I need to know. 3 days after finding the key, I finally worked up the courage to call Barbara and invite her over for coffee. She arrived promptly at 10, the same time we'd been meeting for Saturday coffee for decades. She brought fresh blueberry muffins from Wilson's Bakery, my favorite, and hugged me tightly at the door. "You're looking better," she said, unwinding her scarf. Barbara had always been the prettier sister, with her honey blonde hair that she still colored faithfully every 6 weeks. and her slim figure maintained through what she called disciplined eating and twice-weekly tennis matches. Am I? I led her into the kitchen, where I'd already set out cups and plates. The key from Richard's desk was in my cardigan pocket, its weight like a small stone against my hip. I don't feel better. Barbara's smile faltered slightly. Well, grief isn't linear. That's what Dr. Phil says anyway. She laughed lightly, setting the bakery box on the counter. We went through the familiar motions, pouring coffee, selecting muffins, arranging ourselves at the kitchen table where we'd shared countless conversations over the years. Barbara chatted about her grandson's soccer tournament, her book club's latest selection, the new restaurant downtown. I nodded at appropriate intervals, waiting for the right moment. Barb, I finally interrupted as she was describing her plans to redecorate her living room. There's something I need to ask you. She paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Of course, anything. Before Richard died, he told me some things. I watched her face carefully. About you and him. For just a fraction of a second, Barbara's expression changed. A micro flash of panic quickly masked by confusion. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it entirely. About me and Richard? What about us? He said it started 25 years ago. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm, too measured for the earthquake happening inside me. An affair. Is that true? The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Outside, a car drove past, its tires crunching on the fallen leaves in the street. The refrigerator hummed. Barbara set down her coffee cup with exaggerated care. He told you that? On his deathbed? Her voice had a brittle quality now. Yes. Was it true? Barbara looked down at her manicured hands, then back up at me, the sister who had been my bridesmaid, who had held me when I cried after my miscarriages, who had helped me plan Jessica's funeral. It wasn't an affair, Eleanor, she said finally. That makes it sound so tawdry. We loved each other. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though Richard's confession had prepared me, hearing the confirmation from my sister's lips made it real in a way it hadn't been before. You loved each other, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. While he was married to me, while you were married to Thomas. She reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled back. It wasn't planned, Ellie. We never meant to hurt you. 25 years, Barbara. That's not an accident. That's a choice you made every day for half my marriage. Her face hardened slightly. You and Richard weren't exactly Romeo and Juliet, were you? When was the last time before his illness that you two even slept in the same bedroom? That's not fair. We had problems after Jessica died. It started long before Jessica died. Barbara interrupted. Your marriage was already hollow, Eleanor. Richard stayed because he was honorable. He didn't want to hurt you. Neither did I. Honorable. The word came out as a harsh laugh. He was sleeping with my sister behind my back for 25 years. Not the whole time, Barbara said quickly, as if this somehow made it better. There were breaks, when he tried to recommit to you, after Jessica especially. I stood up, needing to move, to put physical distance between us. Did Thomas know? A shadow crossed Barbara's face. He suspected. It's why he drank, I think. Part of why, anyway. Thomas, Barbara's husband, had died of liver failure 7 years ago. I had stood beside my sister at his funeral, had helped her sort through his belongings afterward, all while she was in love with my husband. Who else knew? Mom? Dad? Our friends? The thought that I might have been the only one in the dark was unbearable. No one knew for certain, Barbara said, though I think Carol Henderson had her suspicions. Carol, my closest friend since college, the godmother to Jessica. I need you to leave, I said, suddenly unable to look at this woman who shared my blood, my childhood memories, who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Ellie, please, can't we talk about this? Try to understand. Understand what? That the two people I trusted most in this world made a fool of me for decades? That every Christmas dinner, every family vacation, every time you came over to comfort me after Jessica died, it was all a lie? Not all of it, Barbara said, her eyes filling with tears. I do love you, Ellie. You're my sister. Get out, I said again, my voice deadly quiet. Get out of my house. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the untouched muffins growing stale in their box. The key in my pocket seemed to burn against my skin now. What other secrets would it unlock? What else had Richard kept from me? The study door was slightly ajar when I returned to it, a silent invitation. I sat in Richard's chair again, the key clutched in my hand, and looked around with new eyes. This room, like our marriage, had been off limits in subtle ways. Richard's private domain where he worked late into the night, where he took phone calls behind closed doors. Phone calls to my sister, perhaps. I pulled open the desk drawers one by one, searching for anything the key might fit. Nothing. Then my eyes fell on the small antique box on the bookshelf, the one Richard had brought back from a business trip to Boston years ago. I'd never seen it opened, had assumed it was merely decorative. The key slid into its lock with a soft click. Inside was a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, and beneath them, a small velvet jewelry box. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a diamond pendant in the shape of a teardrop. Elegant, expensive, clearly not costume jewelry. I had never seen it before, had certainly never worn it. A gift for Barbara, then, hidden in plain sight in our home. I untied the ribbon around the letters. The first one, dated 23 years ago, began, "My darling, last night was..." I couldn't read further. The handwriting was unmistakably Richard's, but these words of passion and longing were addressed to my sister, not to me. I replaced everything in the box, locked it, and slipped the key back into my pocket. There would be time to read the letters later, to understand the full extent of their betrayal. For now, I needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of decades of lies. Outside, the October afternoon was fading into evening. I walked without direction, past houses where pumpkins grinned from porches and fallen leaves skittered across lawns. In these homes, families were gathering for dinner, sharing the details of their days, living lives that might be imperfect but were at least, presumably, rooted in some basic truth. My phone rang in my pocket, Barbara, according to the screen. I declined the call and kept walking as darkness fell, trying to outpace the knowledge that the sister who had once bandaged my skinned knees had inflicted a wound that might never heal. The rain tapped gently against my bedroom window, a soft rhythm that took me back to another rainy night long ago. I was 22, fresh out of college, sitting on the floor of our first apartment surrounded by moving boxes. Richard had just carried me over the threshold, so young in his rented tuxedo, his dark hair falling over his forehead as he laughed and pretended to stagger under my weight. "Mrs. Williams," he had said, setting me down carefully among the cardboard chaos. "Welcome home." The apartment was tiny, with water stains on the ceiling and temperamental plumbing, but that night it felt like a palace. We made love on a mattress on the floor, the rain creating shadows that danced across our bare skin. And afterward, Richard had traced the curve of my face with his fingertip. "I'll never let anything hurt you," he promised. Not ever. I believed him then. I believed him through the lean early years when we ate macaroni and cheese 4 nights a week so we could save for a house. I believed him through my first miscarriage, when he held me as I cried for a baby whose face I would never see. I believed him when Jessica was finally born after 3 losses, and he wept as he held her, this miracle we had created together. "She has your eyes," he had whispered, touching her tiny eyelids with reverent gentleness. When did he stop loving me? Was it sudden, like a switch being flipped, or gradual, like the slow dimming of a light? Did he wake up one morning beside me and realize he wanted my sister instead? Or had he always wanted her, even as he stood beside me at the altar? I reached for the shoebox I'd pulled from the back of my closet, a collection of mementos from our life together. Inside was Jessica's first baby tooth, carefully wrapped in tissue, the corsage from our senior prom, dried and fragile, the hospital bracelet from Jessica's birth, and photographs, so many photographs. Richard and me at 19, sitting on the hood of his father's Buick, my head on his shoulder. Richard kneeling in front of me in the snow outside my parents' house, a small velvet box in his hand. Our wedding day, me in my mother's restored gown, Richard handsome and serious in his tuxedo, both of us radiating the certainty that our love would endure. Had it all been a performance? A carefully maintained facade? No, I refused to believe that. Whatever happened later, those early years had been real. The Richard who worked double shifts so I could finish my teaching degree, who built bookshelves for our first house with his own hands, who read to Jessica every night even when he was exhausted from work. That man had loved me. Of that much, I was certain. I pulled out another photo, the 3 of us at the Maine State Fair when Jessica was about 7. She sat on Richard's shoulders, cotton candy in one hand, the other holding on to her father's hair for balance. I stood beside them, looking up at our daughter with a smile. Richard's arm was around my waist, anchoring me to him. We had been happy that day. I remembered Jessica's delighted squeals on the Ferris wheel, Richard winning her a stuffed elephant at the ring toss, the three of us sharing an elephant ear, our fingers sticky with cinnamon sugar. It had been real. It had to have been. Another photo. Christmas morning when Jessica was 14. She sat cross-legged under the tree in flannel pajamas, tearing into a gift. Richard and I were on the couch behind her, coffee mugs in hand, watching our daughter with identical expressions of love. That was 3 years before she died. 3 years before everything changed. According to the dates on Barbara's letters, the affair was already underway by then. Had Richard been thinking of my sister even as we decorated our Christmas tree? Had he been comparing me to her, finding me wanting? I set the photo down, unable to look at it anymore. Instead, I pulled out a small notebook, Jessica's diary, which the police had recovered from her backpack after the accident. I had never read it, had considered it a violation of her privacy even after her death. But now, with Richard's confession about the argument before the crash, I needed to know what my daughter had been thinking in her final days. The diary's pages were filled with the looping handwriting of a teenage girl. Entries about school, friends, the boy she had a crush on, complaints about homework, about me and Richard being totally lame about her curfew. Normal teenage things. Then, about a month before her death, the tone changed. April 12th. Found something weird today. A letter in Dad's coat pocket when I was looking for quarters for the vending machine. It was from Aunt Barbara, but it didn't sound like a normal letter. It sounded, I don't know, like they have a secret. I put it back, but I can't stop thinking about it. Should I ask him? Or Mom? I don't know what to do. April 15th. Decided not to say anything about the letter. Maybe I misunderstood. But Dad's been acting strange around me, like he knows I know something. At dinner tonight, Mom asked if everything was okay with us, and we both said yes at the same time. But it was such a lie. April 20th. I think Dad is cheating on Mom with Aunt Barbara. I found more letters. I feel sick all the time now. How could they do this to Mom? To Uncle Thomas? I hate them both. April 28th. I told Mark about everything. He says I should confront Dad, that Mom deserves to know, but it would destroy her. It would destroy our whole family. I don't know what's right anymore. May 3rd, I'm pregnant. 5 weeks. Haven't told Mark yet. Haven't told anyone. How can this be happening? I'm 17. I can't have a baby, but I can't get rid of it either. I keep thinking about how Mom had all those miscarriages before she had me, how much she wanted a baby. Maybe this is meant to be. The final entry was dated May 7th, the day of the crash. Today I'm telling Dad about the baby. I don't know how he'll react, but I can't keep it a secret anymore. Maybe it will make him see that secrets destroy everything good. Maybe it will make him stop whatever's happening with Aunt Barbara before Mom finds out and it kills her. I wish I could talk to Mom about this, but she's been so sad lately. I think she suspects something's wrong between me and Dad, but she doesn't push. She never pushes. Sometimes I wish she would. I closed the diary, tears blurring my vision. My daughter had known. She had carried that knowledge for weeks, protecting me even as she struggled with her own crisis. And in the end, her attempt to use that knowledge to save our family had cost her her life. And Richard had never told me. Not about the affair, not about Jessica knowing, not about her pregnancy. For 15 years, he had let me believe it was just a tragic accident, that Jessica had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The rain outside had turned into a downpour now, drumming against the roof with increasing urgency. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a spring storm moving in from the Atlantic. I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by the artifacts of a life I thought I had lived, a marriage I thought I had understood, and felt the foundations of my world crumbling beneath me. All those years grieving together for Jessica, seeking comfort in each other even as the gulf between us widened. Had any of it been real? Had Richard felt genuine grief for our daughter, or just guilt? When he held me as I cried, had he been thinking of Barbara? I gathered the photos and mementos, placing them carefully back in the shoebox, all except for Jessica's diary, which I kept separate. There was more to read, more to understand about my daughter's final weeks, but not tonight. Tonight, the rain and my memories were enough company in this house that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. A week after Barbara's visit, I received an embossed cream envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to a memorial service for Richard at his accounting firm, celebrating the life and legacy of Richard Anthony Williams. It read in elegant script, "Please join us in honoring a beloved colleague, mentor, and friend." The service was scheduled for the following Saturday. I hadn't been consulted about it. Hadn't even been informed it was happening until this formal invitation arrived. Like I was just another business associate, not his wife of 42 years. I called the firm, asked to speak to Martin Schaefer, Richard's longtime partner. His secretary put me on hold for so long I nearly hung up. But finally, Martin's booming voice came over the line. "Eleanor, good to hear from you. I assume you're calling about the memorial?" "Yes, Martin." I'm a bit surprised I wasn't involved in the planning. There was an awkward pause. "Well, Barbara has been handling most of the arrangements. She said you were still too overwhelmed with grief to manage the details." "Of course she did." "I see. And you didn't think to confirm that with me directly?" Another pause. "Eleanor, I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding. Barbara assured us she was acting with your knowledge and approval. She's been in the office several times this week, going through Richard's things, helping us organize his files for clients." "She's been going through his office?" The thought of Barbara rifling through Richard's professional life, perhaps looking for evidence of their relationship, made my stomach clench. "Yes, she's been quite helpful. She seems to know a lot about Richard's work, his clients' preferences, more than we expected, frankly." "I'll bet she does," I thought bitterly. How many times had Richard discussed his work with her during their secret meetings? How many details of his life, our life, had he shared with my sister while I remained in the dark? "Martin, I'd like to come in today if possible, to see Richard's office before it's completely dismantled." Of course, though Barbara has already packed up most of his personal items, said she was bringing them to you." Another lie. I hadn't received a single item from Richard's office. 2 hours later, I walked into the sleek downtown building that housed Williams, Schaefer, and Associates. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, smiled professionally as I approached. "I'm Eleanor Williams, Richard Williams' wife. I believe Martin Schaefer is expecting me." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, Mrs. Williams." "Yes. Mr. Schaefer mentioned you might be coming in." She pressed a button on her phone. "Mr. Schaefer, Mrs. Williams is here to see you." Martin appeared moments later, his round face set in an expression of formal sympathy. "Eleanor, good to see you. Please, come back to my office. More private there." I followed him through the familiar hallways, nodding at staff members who murmured condolences as I passed. Richard had built this firm from nothing, had worked 60-hour weeks for years to make it successful. I had typed his first business proposals at our kitchen table, had entertained potential clients in our home, had stood beside him at every company Christmas party for 4 decades. This place was as much a part of my life as it was his. Martin's office was larger than I remembered, with a view of the harbor that must have cost the firm a pretty penny. He gestured me to a leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee? Water?" "No, thank you. I'd like to see Richard's office." Martin shifted uncomfortably. Yes. Well, as I mentioned, Barbara has already been through it. I'd still like to see it." "Of course. It's just that, well, it's not exactly his office anymore. Given the circumstances, we've already reassigned the space." "Circumstances? It's been 3 weeks since my husband died, Martin." He couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Yes. Well, the firm must continue. Clients need reassurance of continuity. You understand." "Who has Richard's office now?" Martin's discomfort increased visibly. "That's actually something I wanted to discuss with you. We've offered Barbara a position with the firm, as a client liaison. Given her familiarity with many of Richard's clients, it seemed a natural fit." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You've hired my sister to replace my husband?" "Not replace exactly, but yes, she'll be taking over many of his client relationships. She starts officially next week, though she's been coming in regularly since, well, even before Richard passed, actually. He was training her, apparently. Each word was like a physical blow. Richard had been preparing Barbara to take his place, professionally as well as personally, right under my nose. How long had this been planned? Had his illness accelerated an existing arrangement, or created a new one? "I'd still like to see the office, Martin." He sighed but stood. "This way." Richard's corner office, the one he had been so proud of, with its view of the old port and the custom bookshelves I had helped him select, was now clearly in transition. The nameplate on the door had been removed. Inside, The bookshelves were half empty, the desk cleared of the family photos and small mementos that had personalized the space. And sitting in Richard's chair, a cardboard box open on the desk in front of her, was Barbara. She looked up as we entered, surprise quickly replaced by a practiced smile. "Ellie, Martin didn't tell me you were coming in today. Evidently there are a lot of things people aren't telling me these days." Martin, sensing the tension, backed toward the door. "I'll leave you two to catch up. Eleanor, we can talk more about the memorial details later." After he left, Barbara and I stared at each other across the desk. Richard's desk, now apparently hers. "What are you doing here, Barbara?" She gestured at the box. "Just finishing up some organizing. I was going to bring these things to you this weekend." She indicated several framed photographs that had been removed from the walls and shelves. Richard receiving a community service award. Richard and me at the firm's 25th anniversary celebration. Jessica's high school graduation photo. "That's not what I meant. What are you doing here, at Richard's firm? Taking his job? Moving into his life like he's been gone for years instead of weeks?" Barbara's smile tightened. "Richard arranged this, Ellie. Before he died, he wanted someone who understood his clients to take over his accounts, and I've been helping him informally for years." "Informally," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" She sighed, setting down the framed photo she'd been holding. "I know you're hurt and angry. You have every right to be. But Richard and I both agreed that when the truth came out, and we always knew someday it would, we needed to be practical about the business implications." "The business implications," I echoed, feeling as if I were standing outside myself, watching this surreal scene unfold. "Of your affair with my husband." "Lower your voice, please. These walls aren't soundproof. Are you worried about your new colleagues finding out the truth, Barbara? About how you got this position?" Her expression hardened. "I earned this position. I have an MBA, remember? While you were reading picture books to elementary school children, I was getting a business degree. Richard recognized my abilities. Among other things, apparently. This isn't productive, Eleanor. What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry we hurt you. It wasn't intended." "Wasn't intended? You slept with my husband for 25 years. Keep your voice down," she hissed, glancing toward the closed door. "And it wasn't like that. It wasn't just physical. We loved each other. We still managed to love you too, in our way. How generous of you both." Barbara stood, smoothing her tailored skirt. "I'm not going to argue with you here. The memorial service is on Saturday. I hope you'll come and behave appropriately. Richard's professional legacy deserves that much." "His professional legacy," I said, my voice shaking now. "What about his personal legacy? The decades of lies? Jessica?" Barbara flinched slightly at my daughter's name. "What about Jessica?" "She knew Barbara. About you and Richard. She found his letters. She confronted him about it the day she died." The color drained from Barbara's face. "That's not... Richard never said..." "No, he wouldn't have, would he? It would have ruined your perfect little narrative. The tragic accident, the grieving parents. Easier to let me believe it was just bad weather. Bad luck." I stepped closer to the desk. "She was pregnant, Barbara. Did you know that? 17 and pregnant and caught in the middle of her father's affair with her aunt. Can you imagine how confused and frightened she must have been?" Barbara sank back into Richard's chair, her composed facade crumbling. "I didn't. We never meant... Save it," I said, turning to leave. "Keep the job. Keep the memories. Keep whatever parts of Richard you managed to steal from me. Just know that every time you sit in that chair, every time you handle one of his clients, you're building your new life on the wreckage of mine. And Jessica's." I was almost to the door when Barbara spoke again, her voice small. "The memorial service will proceed without me," I finished for her. "Celebrate Richard's legacy, however you see fit. I'll be remembering my husband and my daughter in my own way." In the elevator down to the lobby, my legs finally gave out. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath as if I'd been running. The humiliation burned like acid. Not just the affair itself, but this calculated takeover of Richard's professional life, this erasure of my role as his wife. The memorial service planned without me, the office cleared without my knowledge, Barbara literally sitting in my husband's chair. Outside, rain had started falling again, a fine mist that matched my mood. I had come downtown by bus, but now the thought of sitting among strangers while I processed what had just happened was unbearable. Instead, I started walking, letting the rain soak through my light jacket. feeling it dampen my hair and run down my face, indistinguishable from tears. 3 blocks from the office, I saw them. A small group of people emerging from an upscale restaurant. Martin Schaefer, 2 other partners from the firm, and Barbara, laughing as someone held the door for her. A business lunch, apparently. Barbara, already taking her place in Richard's world while I wandered the rainy streets alone. I ducked into a doorway, unwilling to be seen, and watched as the group said their goodbyes. Martin kissed Barbara on the cheek. A collegial gesture, nothing more. But it struck me like a betrayal nonetheless. These people had known me for decades, had come to our home for dinner parties, had sent flowers when Jessica died, and now they were embracing Barbara as one of their own, unaware of or indifferent to the true nature of her relationship with my husband. Or perhaps they did know. Perhaps Richard and Barbara's secret had been common knowledge in his professional circle, with only me left in the dark. The thought made me physically ill. I waited until they dispersed before continuing my walk home, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time I reached my house, I was soaked through, shivering, my shoes squelching on the hardwood floors of the entryway. The answering machine was blinking when I entered the kitchen. 3 messages, all from Barbara. Ellie, about today. Delete. Eleanor, please call me back. We need to. Delete. Ellie, I know you're hurt, but running away isn't. Delete. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, the room Richard and I had shared for most of our marriage, until Jessica's death drove a wedge between us that neither of us could breach. I had slept alone in this room for 15 years while Richard used the guest room down the hall, both of us imprisoned by grief and silence. Or so I had believed. Now I wondered if his move to separate bedrooms had less to do with grief and more to do with guilt, or worse, with making himself more available for clandestine meetings with my sister. I peeled off my wet clothes and stood naked in front of the full-length mirror, examining the body that had apparently not been enough to keep my husband faithful. I was never a beauty like Barbara, but I had been pretty once. Had turned heads when Richard and I walked into a room together. Now, at 64, I saw only an aging woman with graying hair and the softness that comes with decades of living, the body that had carried and delivered our daughter, that had comforted Richard through career setbacks and family losses, that had moved through the world believing itself loved. What a fool I had been. I pulled on dry clothes, then sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The rain hammered against the windows now, driven by a strengthening wind, a proper nor'easter brewing. Somewhere in the house, a window rattled, and the heat kicked on with its familiar metallic groan. Normal sounds, familiar sounds, but nothing was normal or familiar anymore. My marriage, my family, my understanding of the past 42 years, all of it was built on quicksand. I lay back on the bed, curling into myself as the storm intensified outside. And for the first time since Richard's death, since his confession, I allowed myself to truly weep. Not the restrained tears of a dignified widow, but the raw, guttural sobs of a woman confronting the utter destruction of everything she had believed to be true. The storm that had drenched me during my walk home from Richard's office continued through the night, its fury matching the turmoil inside me. I woke the next morning to find a large branch from the maple tree in the front yard had crashed through the sunroom window, leaving glass and rain-soaked debris scattered across the floor. In the pale light of dawn, I stood amid the wreckage, coffee mug clutched in my hand, and felt a strange sense of clarity. The destruction seemed fitting somehow, the outside of my home now reflecting the devastation within. As I swept up shards of glass, careful not to cut myself, I realized I had spent the past 3 weeks since Richard's death being careful not to disturb the narrative of our marriage, careful not to reveal the ugly truth to friends and neighbors, careful to maintain the facade of the grieving widow while privately grappling with betrayal so profound it had rewritten my past. I was tired of being careful. The kitchen phone rang. Barbara again, most likely. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I dialed another number, one I hadn't called in weeks. Carol, it's Eleanor. I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Carol Henderson had been my closest friend since our college days at Bowdoin. She had stood beside me at my wedding, had held my hand through each miscarriage, had helped plan Jessica's funeral. If Barbara was right and Carol had suspected something about the affair, I needed to know. She arrived an hour later, bearing a casserole dish and a concerned expression. Ellie, honey, You look terrible. Come in. Mind the glass. There might still be some pieces I missed. I led her to the kitchen, where I poured us both coffee. Carol's gaze moved between my face and the storm damage visible through the doorway to the sunroom. That's quite a mess. The storm broke more than just my window, I said. And then, without preamble, did you know about Richard and Barbara? Carol's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. What? Richard confessed before he died. They've been having an affair for 25 years. My husband and my sister. I watched her face carefully. Did you know? She set down her cup slowly. Oh, Eleanor, that's not an answer. Carol looked away, then back at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and compassion. I didn't know for certain. I suspected something, the way they looked at each other sometimes, how defensive Barbara would get if anyone criticized Richard. But I never had proof, and I never wanted to hurt you with suspicions that might be unfounded. So you said nothing. What would you have done in my position? Would you have come to me with vague suspicions about Thomas? If you'd had them? Without proof? She had a point. I might have made the same choice in her shoes, but that didn't lessen the sting of having been the last to know about my own marriage. There's more, I said, and told her about Jessica's diary, about the pregnancy, about the real cause of the accident that took my daughter's life. Carol's hand covered her mouth in horror. Oh God, Ellie, I had no idea. Neither did I. For 15 years, I've been grieving a tragedy that was actually, what? A murder? A negligent homicide? What do you call it when your husband's reckless response to your daughter's pregnancy revelation causes a fatal crash? I don't know, Carol admitted. I don't think there's a word for it. And now Barbara's taken over his position at the firm. They're having a memorial service for him on Saturday that she organized without consulting me. It's like they had this whole plan in place, just waiting for him to die so they could rewrite the narrative. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air between us. What was I going to do? Continue as I had been, the passive recipient of others' decisions about my life, the dutiful widow playing the role assigned to me, the sister who forgives the unforgivable for the sake of family peace? I'm going to take back the truth, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Starting with Jessica. After Carol left, I spent the morning making calls. To Jessica's high school friends, now in their 30s with families of their own. To Mark Peterson, the boy she had mentioned in her diary, her boyfriend apparently, and the father of the baby she had been carrying. To the police officer who had investigated the crash, now retired. To our family doctor, who had treated Jessica since childhood. Some were surprised to hear from me after so many years. Others seemed wary, as if they suspected my questions might lead to uncomfortable territory. But I pressed on, piecing together the weeks leading up to Jessica's death from perspectives other than Richard's carefully constructed version. Mark Peterson agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown the following day. He was 33 now, married with 2 children, working as an engineer at the naval shipyard. I recognized him immediately when he walked in, older, more filled out, but with the same serious eyes I remembered from the handful of times Jessica had brought him to our home. Mrs. Williams, he said, extending his hand. It's been a long time. Thank you for meeting me, Mark. And please, call me Eleanor. We settled at a corner table with our coffees, the awkwardness of our connection hanging between us. This man had loved my daughter, had created a child with her that never had the chance to be born, and until yesterday, I hadn't known either fact. Jessica's diary, I began, watching his face carefully. I found it recently. She wrote that she was pregnant, that you were the father. Mark's expression didn't change. Yes. You knew? Of course I knew. I went with her to the clinic for the test. How did you feel about it? He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. Scared. We both were. But I loved Jessica. I told her whatever she decided, I would support her. If she wanted to keep the baby, I'd marry her, get a job instead of going to college. If she wanted adoption or the other option, I'd be there for that too. What did she decide? She wanted to keep it. She was terrified of telling you and Mr. Williams, but she was determined. She thought, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. She thought a baby might bring your family closer together, that it might heal some of the distance she felt had developed. Did she tell you why she thought there was distance in our family? Again, that careful consideration before speaking. She had concerns about your marriage, about Mr. Williams's relationship with her aunt. So Jessica had confided in Mark about her suspicions regarding Richard and Barbara. I wondered how many others she had told. How many people in our circle had known or suspected what was happening while I remained oblivious. The day of the accident, I said. Jessica wrote that she was planning to confront Richard about the baby and about his relationship with Barbara. Did you speak to her that day? Mark nodded. She called me from school, asked me to meet her afterward. But then Mr. Williams showed up unexpectedly to pick her up. She texted me that she was going to talk to him while they drove, that it might be better that way. Private, but not trapped in the house. His voice broke slightly. That was the last I heard from her. We talked for nearly an hour. Mark shared memories of Jessica I had never heard. Her dreams of becoming a marine biologist. Her secret volunteer work at an animal shelter. The poem she had written for him that he still kept in his wallet. This young man had known sides of my daughter that I, her mother, had never seen. Thank you, I said as we prepared to leave. For loving her, for being honest with me now. I've always wondered if I should have come to see you after the funeral, he admitted. To tell you about the baby, about her concerns regarding your husband and sister. But Mr. Williams made it very clear I wasn't welcome. Richard spoke to you after Jessica died. He came to my parents' house, said it would be better for everyone, especially you, if the pregnancy remained private. That knowing would only add to your grief. Mark shook his head slightly. I was 18, devastated and intimidated by him, so I agreed. One more secret Richard had kept from me, one more decision he had made about what I was allowed to know about my own daughter's life and death. As I drove home from meeting Mark, I felt something shifting inside me, a tectonic movement of emotion and resolve. The passive acceptance that had characterized my response to Richard's betrayal was giving way to something harder, more defined. Anger, yes, but also determination. A fierce need to reclaim the narrative of my life from those who had manipulated it for their own purposes. At home, I found a message from Martin Schaefer on my answering machine, his tone conciliatory. Eleanor, I've spoken with Barbara, and I understand there's been some confusion about the memorial arrangements. Please call me. I'd like to make this right. Make this right. As if a few adjustments to a memorial service could compensate for the systematic dismantling of my marriage, my family, my understanding of the past 4 decades. I didn't return the call. Instead, I went upstairs to the spare bedroom that had become Richard's after Jessica died. I hadn't entered it since his final hospitalization, had let it remain a shrine to his absence. Now I surveyed it with new eyes, the perfectly made bed, the row of economics and business books on the shelves, the closet still full of his expensive suits. With methodical precision, I began emptying the closet, placing each item in one of 3 piles: donate, discard, or save for evidence. The evidence pile was for anything that might contain proof of his relationship with Barbara: receipts, notes, photographs, gifts. In the pocket of a rarely worn sports coat, I found a small velvet box containing a pair of sapphire earrings I had never seen before. In his bedside drawer, a burner phone with dozens of text messages between him and a contact listed simply as B. Behind the row of business books, a small leather-bound journal filled with entries in Richard's neat handwriting, reflections on his double life, his guilt, his plans for a future that now would never come to pass. I cannot leave E, while she is still grieving J, one entry read. But someday, when enough time has passed, perhaps we can finally be together openly. I had been a placeholder, a commitment Richard couldn't bring himself to break, not out of love, but out of pity and social obligation. The revelation should have devastated me, but instead, it hardened my resolve. By evening, I had systematically dismantled the shrine to Richard that his bedroom had become. The suits were boxed for donation, the personal items sorted and cataloged, the evidence secured in a fireproof safe I had originally purchased to protect family documents, birth certificates, Jessica's school records, our wills. As darkness fell, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists, forming plans. There would be no tearful confrontation with Barbara, no public scene at Richard's memorial service. Those were the actions of a woman still seeking validation, still hoping for remorse from those who had wronged her. I was beyond that now. The storm had cleared, both literally and metaphorically. In its wake was a clarity I hadn't felt in years, perhaps had never truly felt. For the first time since Richard's confession, since his death, I was thinking not about what had been done to me, but about what I would do next. The phone rang again. Barbara, according to the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail, but this time I didn't immediately delete her message. Instead, I listened to my sister's voice, controlled, but with an undercurrent of anxiety. Ellie, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we need to talk about the house, about Richard's assets. There are things you don't understand about the arrangements we made. Please call me back. Arrangements, assets, the clinical language of division and ownership. What was she suggesting? That Richard had made financial provisions for her beyond the grave? That she expected to claim part of what he and I had built together over 4 decades? I added another item to my list. Contact Richard's personal attorney. Not the firm's lawyer, but the independent counsel he had used for our wills and estate planning. There might be surprises there too. Provisions or changes made without my knowledge. As I wrote, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The woman I had been 3 weeks ago, the devoted wife, the deceived spouse, the passive recipient of others' machinations, was fading like morning mist. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more defined. Eleanor Williams, not Richard's widow, not Barbara's betrayed sister, not Jessica's grieving mother, just Eleanor, a woman reclaiming her story, 1 page at a time. The law office of Green & Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a converted textile mill overlooking the Presumpscot River. James Green had been our family attorney for 30 years, had handled our wills, Jessica's trust fund after the accident, and presumably, the transfer of Richard's assets after his death. If anyone had information about the arrangements Barbara had mentioned, it would be him. Eleanor, he said, rising from behind his desk as his secretary showed me in. I'm so sorry about Richard. I meant to come to the funeral, but I was in Boston for a conference. Thank you, James. I appreciate the thought. What brings you in today? I would have been happy to come to you. I settled into the chair across from him. I need to understand Richard's will, the current version. Of course. He pulled a file from his cabinet. As you know, you and Richard had mirror wills, everything to the surviving spouse, then to Jessica, with provisions for various charities after he cleared his throat, after she passed. Yes, that was our arrangement. But I have reason to believe Richard may have made changes I'm not aware of. James's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. What makes you think that? Let's just say recent events have called into question how much I actually knew about my husband's activities. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I see. Well, I can tell you that Richard did consult me about possible changes to his will approximately 6 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. What kind of changes? He inquired about creating a separate trust for another beneficiary. He didn't specify who, just asked about the legal mechanism for doing so. And did he follow through? James hesitated, his professional composure slipping slightly. Eleanor, I've been your family's attorney for 3 decades. I've always represented both you and Richard. I understand that, James, and I appreciate your position. But Richard is gone, and I'm trying to piece together exactly what he did, and with whom, in his final months. Legally speaking, as his widow and the executor of his estate, don't I have the right to know if he created additional trusts or made provisions for other beneficiaries? He sighed. Yes, you do. And to answer your question, Richard did not create any new trusts through my office. But he did change the beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy I wasn't previously aware of. A policy separate from your joint coverage. Who is the beneficiary? Barbara Lawson, your sister. Though I had suspected as much, hearing the confirmation sent a chill through me. How much is the policy worth? $2 million. The amount hung in the air between us. $2 million. More than our house. More than Richard's share of the accounting firm. A sum that spoke not of casual affair, but of commitment, of a future plan together. When did he take out this policy? 20 years ago, according to the paperwork. It was with a different carrier than your joint policies, which is why it never came up in our annual reviews. 20 years, while Jessica was still alive, while we were still to all outward appearances a happy family. Is there anything else I should know about? Any other assets, accounts, or properties I might not be aware of? James hesitated again. There is a safety deposit box at Coastal Savings Bank, box 437. Richard added it to the list of assets in his will about 10 years ago, but specified that its contents were to be distributed according to instructions inside the box itself. Do you know what's in it? No. And legally, I don't have access to it, but as executor you do. I left James's office with a copy of Richard's will, documentation of the life insurance policy naming Barbara as beneficiary, and the key to the safety deposit box. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture of meticulous planning over decades, Richard creating a parallel financial life alongside his parallel emotional one. Coastal Savings Bank was a small local institution where Richard and I had kept a joint checking account in the early years of our marriage, before he moved our banking to the larger institution that handled his firm's accounts. I hadn't set foot inside it in at least 20 years. The young woman at the new accounts desk looked dubious when I requested access to the safety deposit box. I'll need to see some identification, ma'am, and verification that you're authorized to access that box. I provided my driver's license and the relevant section of Richard's will naming me as executor. She disappeared into a back office, returning several minutes later with an older man in a suit. Mrs. Williams, I'm Stephen Porter, the branch manager. I understand you're seeking access to Mr. Williams' safety deposit box. That's correct. As his widow and the executor of his estate, I believe I have the right to access it. Of course. It's just that Mr. Williams left specific instructions about that particular box. What kind of instructions? Porter looked uncomfortable. He specified that in the event of his death, the box was to be accessed only in the presence of both yourself and Barbara Lawson. Another safeguard. Another way Richard had controlled the narrative even from beyond the grave. I see. And if I insist on accessing it without my sister present? I'm afraid bank policy, in accordance with the written instructions provided by the account holder, prohibits that. Even for the executor of the estate? Even then, yes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams. I had expected something like this. One more hurdle Richard had placed in my path. One more way he had tried to force Barbara and me together in the aftermath of his death. Well, two could play at that game. In that case, I said, I'd like to open a new safety deposit box, in my name only. 30 minutes later, I left the bank with the key to my own box, number 439, just 2 down from Richard's. My next stop was the county records office, where I spent the afternoon combing through property records, business filings, and tax documents. By the time the office closed at 4:30, I had a much clearer picture of Richard and Barbara's financial entanglement. There was a condominium in Portland's upscale East End, purchased 15 years ago by a limited liability company, for which Richard was the sole manager, and Barbara, the registered agent. A joint bank account at a credit union neither of us had ever used for our household finances. A small business, ostensibly a consulting firm, registered in both their names, with minimal activity but regular deposits. The pattern was clear. Richard had been establishing financial connections with Barbara for decades, creating infrastructure for a life together that ran parallel to our marriage. The condo was likely their meeting place. The consulting firm, a way to justify time spent together and perhaps to provide Barbara with income that wouldn't raise questions with her husband Thomas. As I drove home in the fading autumn light, I felt strangely calm. The revelation should have devastated me, should have shattered what remained of my composure. Instead, each new discovery seemed to strengthen the armor I was building around myself, a protective shell of knowledge, of clarity about exactly what I was dealing with. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a car I didn't recognize parked at the curb, a sleek silver Audi with temporary plates. As I got out, the driver's door of the Audi opened, and Barbara emerged. "We need to talk, Ellie," she called, striding up the driveway to meet me. "You haven't been returning my calls." "I've been busy," I said, continuing toward the front door without slowing my pace. Discovering the extent of my husband's deception tends to fill one's schedule. That's exactly why we need to talk. There are things you don't understand. I turned to face her, keys clutched in my hand. "I understand plenty, Barbara. I understand the life insurance policy. I understand the condo in the East End. I understand the consulting firm, the joint bank account, the safety deposit box Richard made sure I couldn't access without you." Her composure faltered slightly. "You've been busy. Did you think I wouldn't investigate? That I'd just accept whatever crumbs of information you and Richard decided I was entitled to? It's not like that, Ellie. Richard wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "By lying to me for 25 years? By setting up a parallel life with my sister? By hiding the truth about Jessica's death? That's a strange definition of protection. Barbara glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in the driveway where neighbors might overhear. Can we please go inside? This isn't a discussion for the street. For a moment, I considered refusing, considered leaving her standing there in the gathering darkness. But there were questions only Barbara could answer, information only she possessed, and I needed all the pieces of this puzzle if I was going to reclaim control of my life. Fine, I said, unlocking the front door, but make it quick. I have plans this evening. A lie, but one that established a boundary, a limit to this unwanted interaction. Inside, I led her to the kitchen, neutral territory, not the living room with its photographs of our family, nor Richard's study with its lingering presence. I didn't offer coffee or tea, didn't invite her to sit. This wasn't a social visit. What do you want, Barbara? She set her purse on the counter, a designer bag I hadn't seen before, perhaps a recent purchase with her new firm position, or the anticipated life insurance payout. I want us to stop being enemies, Ellie. We're sisters. We're family, despite everything. That hasn't changed, hasn't it? You slept with my husband for 25 years. You knew about Jessica's pregnancy, about the real cause of the accident. You've been planning to step into Richard's life, professionally and financially, for God knows how long. Those aren't the actions of family, Barbara. They're the actions of someone who sees me as an obstacle, not a sister. She had the grace to look away, to not challenge these accusations directly. It's more complicated than you think. Then uncomplicate it for me. Tell me something, anything, that would help me understand how my sister and my husband could betray me so completely, for so long. Barbara took a deep breath, then met my eyes directly. Richard was going to leave you, before Jessica's accident. We had it all planned. The condo was supposed to be our transition place until the divorce was finalized. But then Jessica died, and he couldn't bring himself to inflict another loss on you so soon. So we waited. How generous. It wasn't easy for us either, Ellie, living in limbo for 15 years, loving each other but unable to be together openly, watching you grieve, knowing we were partially responsible. Partially responsible, I repeated. That's a very clinical way of describing your role in my daughter's death. Barbara flinched. That's not fair. Richard lost control of the car because he was upset about the pregnancy, not because of our relationship. Jessica confronted him about your affair, Barbara. It's in her diary. She found his letters to you. The argument wasn't just about her pregnancy. It was about his betrayal of our family. She paled slightly. I didn't know that part. Richard never told me. There seems to be a lot Richard didn't tell both of us. A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. Finally, Barbara spoke again, her voice softer. Despite what you think, Richard loved you, Ellie. Not the way he loved me, but he did care for you. He felt tremendous guilt over Jessica, over how everything happened. That's why he stayed, why he took care of you all these years. Took care of me, I echoed, the phrase stoking a fire I had been carefully banking inside me, like I was some obligation, some responsibility to be managed. Not a wife, not a partner, a problem to be solved. That's not what I meant. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did, what you're still doing. I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal, the nervous pulse at her throat. Let me be very clear, Barbara. I don't want your pity, your explanations, or your attempt at reconciliation. What I want is the truth, all of it, starting with what's in that safety deposit box. She blinked, surprised by the sudden pivot. The box? It's just paperwork. Deeds, account information, letters. Letters? From Richard to me to Richard. Over the years, he thought they might have historical value someday. The audacity of it. My husband and sister preserving their love letters for posterity, as if their affair were some grand romance worthy of documentation, rather than a sordid betrayal of the people who trusted them most. I want to see the box, Barbara. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. at Coastal Savings. She hesitated. Why? What good will it do to see evidence of something that already hurts you? Because I'm through with secrets and half-truths. Because I deserve to know exactly what was happening in my own marriage, my own family. Because Richard doesn't get to control the narrative anymore, and neither do you. Barbara looked at me for a long moment, as if seeing something in my face she hadn't noticed before. perhaps the steel beneath the surface, the determination that had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and revelation. "All right," she finally said. 9 a.m. tomorrow. But Ellie, don't expect this to bring you peace. Some truths only cause more pain. I'm not looking for peace, Barbara. I'm looking for power. The power that comes from knowing exactly what I'm dealing with, and exactly what I plan to do about it. After she left, I returned to the kitchen table where I'd been compiling my findings. To the stack of documents, I added a new page. Safety deposit box. Contents to be examined tomorrow. The steady accumulation of evidence was like assembling armor, piece by piece, preparing for a battle whose parameters were only now becoming clear to me. In Richard's study, the phone rang. The private line he had insisted on maintaining, even as most people switched exclusively to cell phones. Few people had this number. I hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello? Mrs. Williams?" A man's voice, vaguely familiar. "This is Detective Harmon. I don't know if you remember me. You investigated Jessica's accident," I said, instantly placing the voice. "Of course I remember you. Yes, ma'am. I got your message about wanting to discuss the case. I'm retired now, but I never forgot your daughter's accident. If you're looking for closure after all these years, I'd be happy to go over the file with you. Actually, Detective Harmon, I'm looking for truth, not closure. My husband made a deathbed confession about the accident. It wasn't just rain and bad luck. He was arguing with Jessica, hit the steering wheel in anger, wasn't watching the road." A long pause. "Mrs. Williams, with all due respect to your late husband's memory, that's not what the evidence showed. The truck ran the stop sign. Even if Mr. Williams had been fully attentive, the collision would have been difficult to avoid." I sank into Richard's desk chair, gripping the phone tighter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband may have been carrying unnecessary guilt. The primary cause of the accident was the other driver's failure to yield, not anything Mr. Williams did or didn't do." The room seemed to tilt around me. But Richard said, "People often blame themselves for tragedies they couldn't prevent, ma'am. Especially parents who lose children. Sometimes a deathbed confession is more about absolving personal guilt than revealing actual facts." After I hung up, I sat in Richard's chair for a long time, staring at the wall of books across from me without really seeing them. If Detective Harmon was right, if Richard hadn't actually caused Jessica's death through his inattention, then why confess to it? Why claim responsibility for something that wasn't his fault? Unless the confession wasn't about the accident at all. Unless it was about something else entirely. Something Richard needed to unburden himself of before he died. The safety deposit box. Whatever was inside it might hold the answer. 9 a.m. couldn't come quickly enough. The next morning dawned clear and cold. A perfect late October day in Maine. I dressed carefully. Charcoal wool slacks, a cream silk blouse, the pearl earrings Richard had given me on our 30th anniversary. Not for his sake, but for mine. I wanted to face whatever was in that safety deposit box as Eleanor Williams, a woman of substance and dignity, not as the shattered widow or the betrayed wife. Barbara was already waiting when I arrived at Coastal Savings Bank, standing near the entrance in a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her expression was guarded, her posture tense. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said as I approached. I said I would. She glanced at her watch, a delicate gold piece that looked new. "Shall we get this over with?" Inside, the branch manager Porter was expecting us. He led us to a private room where safety deposit boxes were viewed, his manner professionally solicitous. "Box 437, as requested," he said, placing it on the table between us. "I'll be outside if you need anything." After he left, Barbara and I stared at the metal box for a long moment, neither of us reaching for it. "You wanted to see it," Barbara finally said. "Go ahead." I inserted the key James Green had given me, turning it slowly. The lock disengaged with a soft click. With steady hands, I lifted the lid. Inside were several manila envelopes, each labeled in Richard's precise handwriting. Financial records, property deeds, letters, 1998-2010, letters, 2011, present, and one smaller envelope, simply marked, "For Eleanor," in the event. I reached for it, but Barbara's hand shot out, covering mine. "Wait, there's a sequence Richard wanted us to follow. The financial records first, then, even now, you're still following his instructions?" I pulled my hand free from hers. "Richard is dead, Barbara. He doesn't get to orchestrate this moment from beyond the grave." I opened the envelope addressed to me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter, dated 2 days before Richard entered the hospital for the final time. Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I've died without finding the courage to tell you the full truth face to face. Or perhaps I tried but couldn't finish before the end came. Either way, I've failed you again, as I failed you so many times throughout our marriage. By now, you know about Barbara and me. What you may not yet understand is that our relationship wasn't the simple affair you might imagine. Barbara isn't just my lover. She's Jessica's biological mother. I felt the room tilt, the words on the page blurring momentarily before snapping back into horrifying focus. The fertility treatments weren't working. After your third miscarriage, you were devastated, despondent. We both wanted a child so desperately. Barbara offered to be our surrogate, using her egg and my sperm. You were away at that teaching conference in Boston. We didn't use doctors or clinics. Too many questions, too much paperwork. Just the turkey baster method they talk about in magazines. It worked the first time. When you came home, we told you the fertility treatments had finally succeeded. You were so happy, so excited to finally be pregnant. I couldn't bear to tell you the truth, that the baby you were carrying wasn't genetically yours. You were such a wonderful mother to Jessica. In every way that matters, you were her mother. The biological connection seemed irrelevant, until Jessica found out. She discovered some old letters Barbara and I had exchanged discussing the arrangement. She confronted us both 3 days before the accident. She was angry, confused, felt her entire identity had been a lie. The pregnancy she revealed to me in the car that day, she believed it was somehow cosmically significant, that she was repeating the pattern of her own conception. She was distraught, irrational. I did lose control of the car, but not because I hit the steering wheel. I was reaching for her, trying to stop her from opening the door while we were moving. She was threatening to jump out, to end a life she suddenly felt was built on deception. The truck did run the stop sign. Detective Harmon was right about that. But if I hadn't been distracted by Jessica's distress I had caused through years of lies, she might still be alive today. I couldn't tell you then. You were already broken by grief. Learning that Jessica wasn't biologically yours, that Barbara and I had conspired to deceive you from the beginning, it would have destroyed whatever was left of you. So I added another lie to the mountain I'd already built. And as the years passed, it became impossible to find the right moment to tell you the truth. I'm a coward, Eleanor. I've always been a coward. Too afraid to leave you after Jessica died. Too afraid to stay with full honesty. Trapped in the prison of my own making. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do ask that you not blame Jessica or Barbara for my failings. The deception was my idea. My responsibility. They both loved you, in their way. Whatever you choose to do with this information, make it public. Keep it private. Confront Barbara or withdraw from her completely. Know that I regret the pain I've caused you. Not a day has passed that I haven't wished I could undo the cascade of lies that began with one seemingly compassionate decision all those years ago. Richard, I read the letter twice, my mind struggling to absorb its implications, to reconcile this new reality with the life I thought I had lived. Jessica, not my biological daughter. Barbara, not just my husband's lover, but the genetic mother of the child I had carried, delivered, raised, and mourned. Slowly, I raised my eyes to Barbara, who was watching me with an expression of mingled dread and relief, the look of someone witnessing the collapse of a dam they had been desperately trying to shore up for decades. You knew I would find out today, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. That's why you tried to discourage me from opening the box. I wanted to tell you myself, she said, in a more controlled environment. Not like this. More controlled, I repeated. Like everything else in my life, carefully managed by you and Richard to prevent me from learning the truth. We thought we were protecting you, by lying about my own daughter's parentage, by letting me believe I had finally conceived after years of trying, when in reality, you and Richard had gone behind my back to create a child together. It wasn't like that, Ellie. We were trying to give you what you wanted most. A baby, a family. The genetic material seemed secondary to the love you would give her. And yet, you made sure to maintain a presence in her life. The doting aunt who was never far away, who took her shopping, came to her school events, taught her to apply makeup when she turned 13. All those moments I had appreciated at the time, grateful for my sister's involvement in Jessica's life, now recontextualized as a biological mother, maintaining connection to her child. Of course I did. I loved her. But Ellie, you were her mother in every way that mattered. You carried her, gave birth to her, raised her. My role was always secondary, supportive. Except when it came to Richard. There, your role was primary. Barbara had the grace to look away. That evolved over time. It wasn't planned. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Nothing was planned, according to you both. The surrogacy just happened. The affair just evolved. Jessica's discovery of the truth was just bad luck. The accident just occurred. What a series of cosmic coincidences my life has been. Ellie, don't call me that. Don't use that name like we're still the sisters who shared a bedroom in secrets and dreams. We're not those people anymore. I gathered the letter and the other envelopes from the box, placing them in my handbag. I'm taking these. All of them. Those aren't all yours to take, Barbara protested. The financial records, the deeds, those concern both of us. Sue me, I said, standing. Take me to court and explain to a judge why you and my husband maintained a secret safety deposit box for decades. Explain the surrogacy that no doctor supervised, no legal document formalized. Explain Jessica's parentage in open court, if that's what you want. Her face paled. That's not necessary, Eleanor. We can resolve this privately, like family. We're not family. Not anymore. We're just two women who happen to love the same man and the same child, both now gone. Whatever connection we had died with them. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Don't come to my home again. Don't call. Don't try to reconcile. Whatever relationship we had is over. I left her sitting there, still staring at the empty safety deposit box, as if it might somehow contain a different outcome, a different truth, a different past than the one revealed in Richard's letter. Outside, the October sunshine seemed too bright, too cheerful for the darkness that had enveloped my world. I walked to my car on legs that felt disconnected from my body, placed my bag with its explosive contents carefully on the passenger seat, and began the drive home on autopilot, muscle memory guiding me through familiar streets that suddenly seemed as foreign as the new reality I was inhabiting. At home, I spread the contents of the envelopes across the kitchen table, organizing Richard's secrets into chronological order. The financial records detailed accounts I had never known about, property purchased under limited liability companies, investments made with Barbara as co-owner or beneficiary. The deeds included not just the East End condo, but a cabin in the White Mountains, a timeshare in Florida, a small commercial property rented to an art gallery downtown. And the letters, hundreds of them, spanning more than 2 decades. I couldn't bring myself to read them yet, couldn't bear to see the intimacy between my husband and sister laid bare in their own words. But I organized them nonetheless, preparing for the moment when I would be strong enough to face their full contents. By evening, I had created a timeline of deception, a detailed chronicle of how Richard and Barbara had constructed a parallel reality alongside the life I thought I was living. The turkey baster conception of Jessica while I was at a teaching conference in Boston. The miracle pregnancy after years of fertility treatments. The birth of a daughter I believed was mine in every sense. The beginning of their affair when Jessica was a toddler. The purchase of the condo as Jessica entered middle school. The planning for Richard to leave me, interrupted by Jessica's death. The 15 years of limbo that followed, with Richard unwilling to inflict another loss on me but equally unwilling to give up Barbara. And through it all, Jessica, the unwitting center of a web of lies, the child who discovered her own origins in the most devastating way possible, who confronted her biological parents with the truth and with her own pregnancy, a cosmic echo that she found both terrifying and significant. My poor, confused daughter. How alone she must have felt in those final weeks, carrying not just a new life inside her, but the crushing knowledge that her entire existence was predicated on deception. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9, startling me from my thoughts. I had been sitting at the table for hours, piecing together the true narrative of my life from the fragments Richard had left behind. My back ached, my eyes burned, and a dull headache pulsed at my temples. But my mind was clearer than it had been since Richard's death. The full truth, brutal, unvarnished, complex, had a clarifying effect. The ground beneath me felt solid again, not because it was pleasant or fair, but because it was real. I was no longer living in a reality constructed by others to protect me or control me. I was seeing the raw architecture of my life, stripped of illusion and comfortable lies, and now I needed to decide what to do with this knowledge. How to move forward in this new, harsh light of truth. How to reclaim agency in a life that had been, in many ways, scripted without my knowledge or consent. The answer came to me as I was reorganizing the papers, preparing to put them away for the night. At the bottom of the stack was a deed I hadn't fully examined. The timeshare in Florida, a 2-bedroom condo in a beachfront complex near Sarasota. According to the document, it had been purchased 15 years ago, just after Jessica's death, with both Richard and Barbara listed as owners. A grief purchase, perhaps, or a consolation prize for the indefinite postponement of their plans to be together openly. Either way, it represented something tangible, something that existed in the real world beyond these papers and revelations. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of the management company listed on the deed. After navigating an automated system, I reached a customer service representative. "Hello, I'm calling about Unit 247 at Gulf Breeze Villas," I said. "I'm Eleanor Williams, wife of Richard Williams, one of the owners. My husband recently passed away, and I'm sorting out his properties." "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Williams," the woman said. "What can I help you with today?" "I'd like to book the unit for the first 2 weeks of November, please." "Let me check availability." "Yes, the unit is currently unoccupied during that period. I can reserve it for you right away. Will anyone else be joining you?" "No," I said, a sense of purpose crystallizing within me. "Just me." After finishing the booking, I sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes longer, contemplating the decision I had just made. Florida, sunshine, warm breezes, a complete change of scenery from the New England fall that was rapidly giving way to winter. Distance from Portland, from Barbara, from the accounting firm and the memorial service, and all the physical reminders of Richard's duplicity. Space to think, to plan, to decide what Eleanor Williams' life would look like now that it was truly her own to shape. I went upstairs to my bedroom, our bedroom once, though Richard hadn't slept there in 15 years, and pulled out a suitcase from the back of the closet. It was time to pack for a different kind of future than the one Richard and Barbara had envisioned. A future of my own design, built on the foundation of truth rather than comforting illusions. For the first time since Richard's confession, since his death, I felt something like anticipation stirring alongside the grief and anger. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The faint, distant sense that beyond the wreckage of what had been might lie something new, something authentic, something mine. The Florida sun felt like a physical weight on my skin after 2 weeks of enforced relaxation at the Gulf Breeze Villas. I had spent my days walking on the beach, reading novels I'd been meaning to get to for years, and most importantly, studying the documents from Richard's safety deposit box with the detached focus of an archaeologist examining artifacts from a long-dead civilization. I had finally read the letters, all of them. The early ones were tentative, filled with guilt and justifications. The middle years showed a deepening relationship, plans made and deferred. The later correspondence, after Jessica's death, revealed 2 people trapped in a holding pattern of their own making, unable to move forward together openly, but equally unable to let go. What struck me most was how they wrote about me, with a mixture of genuine affection and patronizing pity. Poor Eleanor, so devoted to Richard despite his emotional absence. Poor Eleanor, so shattered by Jessica's death she could never be told the truth. Poor Eleanor, whose stability depended on the careful maintenance of illusions. They had underestimated me, catastrophically. I returned to Portland on November 15th, the day before Richard's memorial service at the accounting firm. Barbara had left 3 messages on my home answering machine during my absence, each progressively more urgent, asking where I was, whether I was coming to the service, what I planned to do with the information from the safety deposit box. I deleted them all without response. The morning of the memorial dawned cold and clear, the kind of crisp, late autumn day that had always been Richard's favorite. I dressed with care, a charcoal suit, pearl earrings, minimal makeup, professional, dignified, controlled. Not the hysterical widow or vengeful sister they might be expecting, but Eleanor Williams, finally the author of her own story. The accounting firm's main conference room had been transformed for the occasion. Photographs of Richard throughout his career lined the walls. Flower arrangements filled the corners. A string quartet played quietly in the background. Nearly 100 people milled about. Colleagues, clients, friends, all there to honor Richard's legacy, if they only knew. I entered quietly, nodding to familiar faces but avoiding lengthy conversations. Near the front of the room, Martin Schaefer stood with several other partners, including Barbara. She was dressed in navy blue, understated, tasteful, appropriate for a grieving sister-in-law about to assume a new professional role. When she saw me, her composed expression faltered momentarily before she recovered, whispering something to Martin before making her way toward me. "Eleanor," she said, voice pitched low. "You came. I wasn't sure. I wouldn't miss it," I replied, equally quiet. After all, who knew Richard better than I did? The irony hung between us, sharp and dangerous. "About what you found in the box." "Not here," I cut her off. "This isn't the time or place for that discussion." "Then when? You've been ignoring my calls. You disappeared for 2 weeks. We need to talk about how to handle this. As a family." "We're not family anymore, Barbara. I told you that." Before she could respond, Martin approached, arms extended in greeting. "Eleanor, so good to see you. We were beginning to worry you might not make it." He hugged me awkwardly, the gesture of someone performing sympathy without fully feeling it. "I wouldn't miss the chance to honor Richard properly," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "After all, it's important that people remember him as he truly was." A flicker of unease crossed Martin's face. "Yes, well, we've put together quite a tribute. Barbara has been invaluable in helping organize everything." "I'm sure she has." I smiled thinly. "When does the program begin?" "In about 10 minutes. We'll have a few speakers sharing memories of Richard, then a toast to his life and legacy." He gestured to the front of the room, where a small podium had been set up. "Barbara will say a few words on behalf of the family, and then—" "I'd like to speak as well," I interrupted. Martin blinked, clearly thrown off script. "Oh, well, of course you're his widow. We just assumed, that is, Barbara indicated you might prefer not to." "I have quite a lot I'd like to say about Richard," I said. It would mean a great deal to me to share my perspective on our life together. Beside me, Barbara had gone very still, her face a careful mask that didn't quite conceal the alarm in her eyes. "Ellie, are you sure that's a good idea? Grief can sometimes make us say things we later regret." "I'm not grieving, Barbara. Not anymore. And I won't regret a word I plan to say today." The memorial service proceeded with polished efficiency. The firm's senior partner gave an opening tribute, highlighting Richard's professional accomplishments. A longtime client spoke about Richard's integrity and attention to detail. The head of a local charity praised his community involvement and generosity. Then Barbara took the podium, the picture of dignified emotion. "Richard Williams was more than just my brother-in-law," she began, her voice steady despite the tears that glistened in her eyes. "He was a dear friend, a valued mentor, and someone who understood the true meaning of family. For 42 years, he was devoted to my sister Eleanor, standing by her through life's greatest joys and deepest sorrows." I sat in the front row, listening to this masterpiece of selective truth, this carefully constructed narrative that bore only a passing resemblance to the reality documented in the papers, now locked in my home safe. "In his final years," Barbara continued, "Richard confided in me his concerns about the future, not for himself, but for those he loved. He wanted to ensure that his clients would be cared for, with the same dedication he had always shown, that his firm would continue to thrive, that his family would be protected. Family, as if she and Richard and I had been a unit, rather than a deceived wife, and the two people systematically betraying her. It is in that spirit that I have agreed to join Williams, Schaefer and Associates to continue Richard's work with his clients, and to honor his legacy through ongoing commitment to the values he exemplified: integrity, loyalty, and unwavering devotion to those who depended on him." Murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. Barbara concluded with a quote from Richard's favorite poet, then stepped down from the podium to appreciative applause. Martin approached the microphone next. "And now Richard's wife of 42 years, Eleanor Williams, would like to share some thoughts." The room quieted as I rose and made my way to the podium. From this vantage point, I could see everyone clearly: the partners who had known Richard for decades, the staff who had worked under him, the clients who had trusted him with their financial futures. All these people who had seen only the carefully constructed public persona, never the man who had systematically deceived everyone closest to him. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "It means a great deal to see how many lives Richard touched during his time with us." Barbara visibly relaxed slightly, perhaps believing I had decided to maintain the polite fiction after all. "I've been Richard's wife for 42 years, I continued. Or at least, that's what I believed I was. The truth, as I've recently discovered, is considerably more complicated. A sudden tension filled the room. Barbara half rose from her seat, then sank back down, her face draining of color. 3 weeks before he died, Richard confessed to me that he had been having an affair with my sister Barbara for 25 years. I paused, letting the words hang in the air as gasps and murmurs swept through the audience. But that was just the beginning of what he revealed. I looked directly at Barbara now, whose expression had shifted from shock to silent pleading. Beside her, Martin Schaefer sat frozen, his professional composure shattered by this unexpected deviation from the script. I also learned that our daughter Jessica, who died in a car accident 15 years ago, was not biologically mine. She was conceived through an arrangement between Richard and Barbara, while I was away at a conference, a surrogacy I never consented to or even knew about until after Richard's death. The room had gone completely silent now, every eye fixed on me in horrified fascination. For 42 years I believed I was living one life, when in fact, I was living another entirely, one designed and controlled by the two people I trusted most, my husband and my sister. I gestured toward Barbara, who had shrunk into herself, eyes fixed on the floor. The same sister who has now been hired by this firm to replace Richard, who has been positioned to benefit from his life insurance policy, who has been named in his will as co-owner of properties I never knew existed. Martin Schaefer finally found his voice. "Mrs. Williams, perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for the truth?" I cut him off. "I disagree, Martin. After decades of secrets and lies, I believe this is exactly the right place for the truth to finally be heard." I turned back to the audience, many of whom appeared stunned, uncomfortable, uncertain whether to stay or flee from this unexpectedly raw and personal revelation. I'm not here to seek sympathy or to damage Richard's professional legacy. The Richard Williams you knew, the accountant, the community leader, the mentor, that person was real. His work was exemplary, his professional ethics beyond reproach. I took a deep breath before continuing. But there was another Richard Williams, the one who lied to his wife for decades, who conspired with her sister to deceive her about the most fundamental aspects of her life, who allowed his own daughter to die believing her entire existence was predicated on betrayal. Barbara had begun quietly weeping now, her carefully applied makeup tracking down her cheeks in dark rivulets. Several of the partners were exchanging alarmed glances, clearly trying to determine how to regain control of a situation rapidly spiraling beyond damage control. I wanted you all to know this today because legacies matter. How we're remembered matters. And I could not stand by and allow a sanitized version of Richard's life to become the official record when the full truth is so much more complex. And yes, so much more painful. I closed the folder of notes I had barely referenced during my speech. Richard Williams was many things to many people. To some of you, he was a trusted advisor, a generous mentor, a community leader. To me, he was the great love of my life, and also its greatest betrayal. Both of these truths can and do coexist. I won't attempt to reconcile them for you. I'm still learning to reconcile them for myself. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with shock, and the collective discomfort of witnesses to an unexpected unveiling of private pain. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to applaud, slowly at first, then with increasing conviction. Others joined in, a ripple of sound growing into a wave of support, not for what Richard had done, or what Barbara had participated in, but for the courage to speak truth in a setting designed for comfortable fictions, for the dignity with which I had reclaimed my narrative from those who had sought to control it. I stepped away from the podium and walked directly out of the conference room, past Barbara's stunned face, past Martin's barely concealed panic, past decades of acquaintances who would never see me, or Richard, the same way again. Outside, the November air felt clean and sharp in my lungs. I had done what I came to do, not to seek revenge or public humiliation, but to establish the truth as the foundation upon which whatever came next would be built. No more secrets, no more carefully maintained illusions. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me, then Barbara's voice, ragged with emotion. "Eleanor, wait. Please." I turned to face her. This woman who had been my sister, my friend, my betrayer, and, most unforgivably, the secret mother of the child I had believed was mine. "What could you possibly have to say now, Barbara? You've destroyed everything," she said, her composure completely abandoned now. "The firm will never hire me after this. Richard's clients will leave. His reputation should reflect who he actually was," I interrupted, "not who he pretended to be. And as for your job prospects, well, consequences tend to follow actions, don't they? Even if they're decades delayed. We were going to tell you eventually. After enough time had passed since Richard's death, we thought it would be less painful that way." I laughed, the sound brittle in the cold air. "You still don't get it, do you? This was never your story to manage. My life, my marriage, my child. These weren't plot points for you and Richard to manipulate at your convenience." "Jessica was my daughter too," Barbara said, a note of defiance entering her voice. "Biologically, at least. Yes, she was. And you let her die believing her entire life was a lie. You let her confront Richard alone in that car. You let her face the devastating truth of her origins and her pregnancy without the support she desperately needed." My voice didn't rise, but it hardened with each word. "That's your legacy, Barbara. Not the affair, not the deception, but the abandonment of a confused, frightened 17-year-old girl who needed her mothers, both of them, to help her make sense of a situation neither of you had the courage to address honestly." Barbara flinched as if I had struck her. "I loved Jessica. I've regretted every day since the accident that I didn't tell her how much she meant to me, that I let Richard insist on maintaining the fiction even after she discovered the truth." "Too late," I said simply. "Much too late." I turned to go, but Barbara reached out, grasping my arm. "What happens now, Eleanor? Where do we go from here?" I gently removed her hand. "I don't know where you go, Barbara. That's for you to figure out. As for me, I'm going home to pack. I've decided to sell the house in Portland. Too many ghosts, too many lies embedded in the walls. Where will you go? Does it matter? For the first time in decades, I get to decide that for myself, without reference to Richard's preferences or your secret relationship, or the careful choreography of deception you both maintained. My life is finally my own." I left her standing there in the parking lot, a small figure against the backdrop of the office building where Richard had spent his professional life, and where, until today, his legacy had seemed assured. As I drove away, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, but something quieter and more profound. The peace that comes with reclaiming your own truth, whatever the cost. The relief of finally speaking words that had been building inside me since Richard's deathbed confession. The liberation of stepping fully into a life that, while irreparably altered, was at last authentically mine. 6 months after Richard's memorial service, I stood on the deck of my new home on the Oregon coast, watching waves crash against the rocky shoreline below. April rain misted softly around me, so different from the harsh New England winters I had known for 6 decades. The air smelled of salt and pine and possibilities. The house was smaller than the one in Portland, just 2 bedrooms, an open-plan living area, and this magnificent deck stretching toward the Pacific. But it was mine in a way the other house had never truly been, purchased with my portion of the proceeds from selling our Portland home and Richard's share of the accounting firm. Barbara had not contested the division of assets. After the memorial service revelation, she had retreated into a shocked silence, emerging only through her attorney to negotiate terms that were, all things considered, remarkably fair. I hadn't spoken to her since that November day in the parking lot. Occasionally, I received an email, tentative overtures about family news, hesitant questions about my new life. I read them, but rarely responded. Some bridges, once burned, cannot and should not be rebuilt. Inside, my laptop chimed with an incoming video call. I went in, shaking raindrops from my hair, and accepted the connection. Mark Peterson's face appeared on screen, his serious eyes so reminiscent of Jessica's that it sometimes took my breath away. "Eleanor, how's the Oregon weather treating you today?" "Wet," I laughed. "But beautiful. The rhododendrons are blooming all along the coast road. How are Lily and Ben?" "Growing too fast. Ben started t-ball last week. Lily's already reading at a third-grade level, according to her teacher. Pride softened his features as he spoke of his children, Jessica's half-siblings in a genetic sense, though neither of them would ever know it. After the truth about Jessica had emerged, Mark and I had formed an unexpected connection. Two people who had loved her in different ways, both robbed of the chance to know her fully by secrets not of our making. We spoke every few weeks now, sharing memories of Jessica, updates on our lives, a friendship forged in shared grief, but sustained by genuine mutual respect. "I wanted to let you know," Mark said, his expression turning more serious. "I visited Jessica's grave last weekend. Left those white roses you suggested. The headstone looks good with the new inscription. After learning the truth about Jessica's parentage, I had decided to have her headstone modified. The original had read simply, Jessica Marie Williams, beloved daughter. The new one added, Truth is the daughter of time. Thank you for doing that," I said. "It means a lot to me." "Of course." He hesitated, then added, "Barbara was there too, at the cemetery. She asked about you." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that always accompanied mentions of Barbara. "What did you tell her?" "Just that you were well, that you'd moved west. Nothing specific." Mark understood the complexity of my feelings about my sister. "She seems different, subdued." "Time changes us all," I said, not willing to explore the topic further. "Have you decided about the scholarship fund proposal?" After selling the Portland house, I had set aside a portion of the money to establish a small scholarship in Jessica's name at her former high school, financial support for young mothers trying to complete their education. Mark had agreed to help administer it, a joint project that honored Jessica's memory in a way that acknowledged rather than obscured the truth of her life. The paperwork's almost complete. Should be ready to announce the first recipient at graduation next month. "I wish I could be there," I said. "You could, you know. Come back for a visit." I glanced out the window at the wild Oregon coastline that had become my sanctuary. "Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet." After we ended the call, I made a cup of tea and carried it back out to the deck, wrapping a woolen shawl around my shoulders against the persistent drizzle. From here, I could see for miles down the rugged coastline, the meeting of land and sea that had drawn me across the country in search of a fresh start. The house in Portland had sold quickly, too many painful memories for potential buyers to sense perhaps, but a desirable property nonetheless. I had kept very little from my life there, some books, Jessica's diary, and the few photographs of her that brought comfort rather than pain. A handful of mementos from my teaching career. Nothing of Richard's, nothing of the life we had supposedly built together. The accounting firm had undergone its own transformation after the memorial service revelation. Martin Schaefer had called me a week later, his voice strained but respectful, to discuss the buyout of Richard's partnership shares. He never directly mentioned what I had revealed, but his careful formality told me everything I needed to know about how the firm was processing the scandal. "We've decided to rebrand," he had said toward the end of the call. "Schaefer, Donovan and Associates, moving forward. Richard's name erased. His professional legacy rewritten." It seemed fitting somehow. Barbara had not gotten the position at the firm after all. According to the occasional updates that reached me through our remaining mutual connections, she had moved to a smaller town in New Hampshire, taken a teaching position at a community college. Started over, in her way, just as I had in mine. The rain intensified, driving me back inside. In the small second bedroom I used as an office, Jessica's diary sat on the bookshelf alongside volumes of poetry and natural history. I had read it cover to cover many times in the months after Richard's death, each reading revealing new layers of my daughter's thoughts, fears, hopes, and confusion. One entry in particular had become something of a touchstone for me. April 30th. Who am I really? If Mom isn't biologically my mother, but she raised me and loved me and is my mother in every way that matters, then what does biology even mean? And if Dad and Aunt Barbara lied about this, what else isn't true? Sometimes I feel like I'm standing on quicksand, like everything I thought was solid is sinking beneath me. But then I think, I am still me. Whatever the circumstances of how I came to be, I am still Jessica. I still love the ocean and hate calculus and want to save the whales. I still have the same friends, the same dreams. The truth about my DNA doesn't change the truth about my soul. Maybe that's what I need to hold on to while everything else shifts. My wise, beautiful daughter, grappling at 17 with questions that had nearly broken me at 64, finding her center in the midst of revelation and betrayal. recognizing that identity transcends biology, that truth matters, but doesn't define us completely. I had tried to follow her example in the months after Richard's death, after the safety deposit box, after the memorial service, to sort through what was essential and what was constructed in my own identity, to determine what remained solid when everything I had believed about my life had been revealed as quicksand. I was still Eleanor. I still loved poetry, and the smell of old books, and the feeling of helping a child discover the magic of reading. I still valued honesty, kindness, and courage. I still had the capacity to build a new life, to find joy in unexpected places, to forge connections based on truth, rather than convenience or deception. The rain had stopped by evening, giving way to a spectacular sunset that painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. I walked along the beach below my house, the wet sand firm beneath my feet, collecting small, perfect shells and smooth stones worn by decades of tidal persistence. This was not the life I had imagined for myself, not the peaceful retirement Richard and I had occasionally discussed in vague terms, not the conventional widowhood I might have expected had his deathbed confession never occurred. It was something else entirely, harder won, more solitary, but also more authentically mine. I had received a letter from Barbara last week, an actual letter, handwritten on heavy stationery, so different from her usual tentative emails. I had recognized her handwriting on the envelope and nearly discarded it unopened, but something had stopped me, perhaps the same instinct that had led me to open the envelope in Richard's safety deposit box, to insist on knowing the full truth, no matter how painful. "I don't ask for forgiveness," she had written toward the end. "I don't deserve it, and I suspect you're not interested in offering it. But I do want you to know that not a day passes that I don't regret the choices I made, the pain I caused, the years of honesty we might have had if I'd found the courage to tell the truth about Jessica from the beginning. You are, the better of us, Eleanor, the most honest, the most deserving of the love both Richard and I claim to feel, but expressed so poorly. If there is anything I have learned from all of this, it is that love without truth is just another form of betrayal." I hadn't responded, might never respond, but I had kept the letter, folded between the pages of a volume of Mary Oliver's poetry, alongside Jessica's diary and the scattered authentic pieces of the life I was rebuilding. As darkness fell over the Pacific, I made my way back up the winding path to my house, to the warm light spilling from windows that framed a future I was still discovering. Tomorrow I would volunteer at the local library, continue work on the memoir I had begun writing, call my new friend Claire, who ran the art gallery in town. Small things, ordinary things, but mine, chosen freely, lived authentically. "I forgive you," I had whispered to Richard as he lay dying, not knowing what was coming, what truths were about to shatter the foundation of my world. I couldn't say with certainty whether that forgiveness still stood, whether it could survive the revelations that followed. Forgiveness, like grief, isn't linear. It ebbs and flows, advances and retreats, sometimes present and sometimes distant on the horizon. But standing on my deck that evening, watching the first stars appear above the vast darkness of the ocean, I felt something close to peace. Not the peace that comes from absence of conflict, or from questions fully answered, but the deeper peace that emerges when you stop fighting against reality and begin instead to build something new from the broken pieces of what came before. Richard's confession had destroyed the life I thought I had lived, but in that destruction lay an unexpected gift, the chance to discover who Eleanor Williams truly was, beyond wife, beyond mother, beyond the careful constraints of others' expectations and deceptions. It turned out she was someone worth knowing, someone strong enough to face truth, to speak it publicly, to rebuild in its clarifying light, someone who could stand alone on a beach 3,000 miles from everything familiar and feel not lost, but found. As I turned to go inside, the wind carried the sound of waves crashing against the shore, a rhythm as old as time itself, persistent, powerful, endlessly renewing, like truth, like healing, like the human capacity to begin again, no matter what has been lost along the way. I closed my door on the darkness, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next would be of my own choosing, my own truth, my own life, finally and completely mine.